So, today I'm here with my buddy CammyCakes. This is probably the most requested episode of this series I've been doing with PvP friends. I'm sure most of you guys know Cammy. He's a fellow bearded Cakes brother, so it should be a lot of fun. We have a few different topics we're going to cover today. One of the big ones that have been requested by a lot of people is kind of a discussion about what it means to play off meta. How do you do it effectively? How do you come up with good counters when you're coming up against something like not just in a way that you want to just randomly pick something just to be off meta, but how do you do it effectively? And Cammy has some interesting points too about how to look at it the right way. We have a lot of different things that we might chat about. I also wanted to do a little section on how to be a good teammate and making good callouts and stuff like that, because I think that's something you're also uniquely good at. I think the place that makes the most sense to start off with talking is just you basically come up with very effective counters to anything you come across in PvP, and you tend to think outside of the box more than I think most like kind of mainstream content creators that I come across. So do you want to kind of...
Yeah, I'm comfortable jumping into this. I'm going to hit this from the perspective of there's using the meta and then there's understanding the meta. So there's a reason that people gravitate to, let's say it as it is right now, 120 hand cannons, shotties, and snipers. Hand cannons will always be the best pick in Destiny because of their damage output for just peeking for an instant. Peek, get a shot off back in the cover, that's 90 damage. So that's what I mean by understanding the meta. It's like, why do they choose this? Really think hard about that, and that's where you're going to start to see some sort of gap or weakness in the playstyle in that meta pick. And one of the biggest gaps in people's builds is their resilience level. That's a good place to start. Let's say 5 resilience makes the 120 RPM hand cannon, the meta pick, take an extra precision shot, and that's huge. But it also stops aggressive sniper rifles. And the worst part about sunsetting is it took aggressive sniper rifles off the table for me with my preferred zoom level. So I didn't really have that option until recently with the Succession sniper rifle and now the Frozen Orbit. A lot of top players forego resilience for some reason, and a counter meta pick is to use aggressive snipes because with the damage booster, you don't have to aim for the head. And that's a big one for me. A lot of people wear it as a badge of honor, like my headshot percentage is 72%. I think that's the wrong stat to be looking at, because if you can put the enemy in the spawn screen by shooting them in the body, why even bother aiming for the head in the first place? Or a better point to look at it is, why put yourself in positions where you can see their head in the first place? Because in these games, the camera comes out of your head, right? You ever heard the term head glitch, where you can only see the forehead of somebody yet they can still shoot you? That's kind of the same reason. On maps like this, Patty, this is Exodus Blue, the previous Trials map. This is the angle where I got the most picks from. So stand right here. We are at the train for audio listeners. I'm going to be across the opposite angle, throw down an Emp Rift, and I'm going to crouch. Patty, can you see my head?
Nope.
That's a body shot for me. All because I looked at the resilience number and I did the quick math in my head, said, yep, that's going to be a kill. And that's my build. I want that option to be available because it forces my enemy to change or to come into trials with the changes already applied. So it makes me as a player not necessarily play my strengths, but focus more on my enemy's weaknesses and adapting to that by understanding the meta. So that's in a nutshell how it all combines.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like speaking to like the body shot thing too, there's a lot of people who kind of look down on people who go for like a double body shot snipe or like cleaning up with a body. But it's like, I don't know, to me it's always like just you do whatever the most effective thing possible is. And it's like if that's you hit them with the body shot snipe and then you clean them up with the hand cannon shot, or maybe like they're already weak and you just go for a body shot with your snipe because you have a higher percentage chance of actually hitting that shot versus missing because you went for a headshot. Like to me, that's just playing smart. But there's kind of some stigma around body shot bandits.
So to expand on this anti-meta thing, eventually some anti-meta strategy is going to be meta because enough people understand it. One of those things that came up this last season was Chaos Reach. That started off as what a lot of people thought is like a meme build because its neutral game's kind of bad, but super is excellent. And then it also has that Pierce. I don't know if it always had the Pierce, but anyway, it's the fact that people can get it multiple times a trials round. that makes it that oppressive, and it's went from something that you didn't see very often to now something that is almost every match.
Yeah. One of the things I always find pretty interesting, you know how like certain games have evolving metas even though there's no changes? Like for example, Super Smash Bros. Melee, I think is probably.
I'm very familiar with
Right, it's
any
like-
example you're about to
Yeah,
throw at
that's
me.
like the most classic game for this, where it's like the game hasn't been updated in what, like I don't know, 20 years now at this point, and
Yeah.
yet the meta has actually evolved over time because players develop different strategies that make certain characters, certain abilities stronger, and then that forces you to come up with a counter meta strategy where you create something new that's better than that. And so it's like even though the game doesn't change, the meta changes, and then so I think you have elements of that in a game like Destiny. But then there's also like the developer changes to the game, which also like kind of artificially change the meta by changing what is the strongest thing all of a sudden. So it's a really like dynamic situation where you have the player base developing new ideas on what makes something strong, but then also like the sandbox itself is dynamically changing with each update, new ability added, new balance patch or whatever.
Yeah, I totally get that. I'm going to just keep hammering in on this topic because I think we're going great places with it. So you can also use things that are established as the meta, but in different ways. And I think a class that has an extremely high skill ceiling and honestly a very good entry point too is Top Tree Dawnblade, which is what I have on right now. It has the Icarus Dash, which a lot of people use as just a movement tool to get from point A to B faster. And that to me is the strongest aspect. But understanding the class is one part of the equation, and then understanding the map is the other. Top Tree Dawnblade is essentially uncapped for a top player because you can consume a grenade to have access to angles with accuracy that's 100% that other people just don't have. So even on this map on Exodus Blue, I played Top Tree Dawnblade. I would say that's a meta pick, but I just kept expanding my knowledge of the angles and found a lot of opening picks. One I do want to show you on screen. So what would happen a lot of the time is teams would rotate and rotate and rotate around the map looking to find a straggler, and someone would be holding a snipe on this angle where I'm standing right now. And so when my team recognized that, if you can stand right here, when my team recognized that, I found this angle where I consume a grenade, float above the trains, and if you look above the trains, that is a snipe angle. Can you believe that?
Yeah, this map is one of the craziest, I think, for these insane angles that you can get. So many objects like that you can hide behind and float above, and it's really crazy for different off angles.
So understanding the meta, Top Tree Dawn's good, and now adapting it, choosing the off meta thing. My exotic choice is Starfire Protocol because I find it valuable to have the best part of the Dawnblade up at all times. The angle potential, the in-air accuracy. I use Starfire over the typical transversive step or even Karnstein because it makes more plays for me and it hard counters teams. Nothing is more scary than the possibility of an aerial attack in Destiny. It makes people completely change the way they have to pre-aim. For example, you might be aiming at head level for majority of engagements, but if you know that a Top Tree Dawnblade exists, you might be aiming not exactly up, but also not exactly at head level. You might be above head level to anticipate and try to reduce that distance that you have to correct. And that can make your teammates have a better time fighting someone because now they're not pre-aimed at them, all for having the possibility of an aerial attack. So I think the exotic armor plays into anti-meta too, even if you use it on an established meta class.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the different things? Okay, like we talked about Chaos Reach for a second. There's this sort of reliance, I think, at like higher level games on basically building supers, and I think a lot of the game comes down to super economy for like when two pretty tough teams play against each other. It's funny, they either seem to go really fast or really slow. Like a lot of times they'll slow
I find the
way
same
down. It's pretty interesting because I feel like there's just the way the supers are in Destiny right now. Most of them are pretty tough to counter, and they're so strong that it ends up winning a lot of games. And
it does.
I think actually when I played with you and Fallout on this map, like I don't know, a few weeks beforehand, you talked about some strategy like of us, hanging out inside a B here with like Revenant hunters and like building up supers here and stuff.
Yeah, and I've evolved the strat since. I really do think the best answer for this map is Chaos Reach, but previously I thought the best answer was Dynamo Revenants and B Flag. The just uptime of Chaos Reach exceeds that slightly to me. And sometimes while searching for an anti-meta answer, you're not going to find that, and that's just reality of a game, and maybe when it needs to be balanced. An example of that is I spent the last month of January on Middle Tree Archstrider due to a charity incentive where I'm not allowed to do anything else in the game. I had to be stuck on Middle Tree Archstrider for every activity. And that made me learn and appreciate it in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise. One of those things was as Stasis is released, all the Revenant Hunters throw those tornadoes, and the Middle Tree Archstrider reflects the tornado, which is hilarious and somewhat effective. So this is some really cool meta development. So Stasis comes out. I start playing Middle Tree Archstrider, and then I start learning that I could be abusing Charge of Light with Raiju's Harness to pop a super, immediately cancel it, and then play slow with Body Shotting and 122 taps until zone, to which I would have another Archstrider. And so it's like we're starting to see some rock, paper, scissors here because Middle Tree Archstrider counters Revenant, and then Chaos Reach starts emerging. And guess what Chaos Reach counters?
Yeah.
It dumps on Middle Tree Archstrider. You cannot block a Chaos Reach. And so now I have this like interesting rock, paper, scissors triangle of this meta development. I still think Revenant is the strongest hunter out there, and it has made a lot of builds for me redundant. It actually changed my choice of exotic. I went full meta on hunter. I maybe don't run the same fragments as everyone else, which is a good success on Bungie's part if they made people choose. But I can actually hop to my hunter real quick if you want to see it, and then you can give me the like honest feedback on the build.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. It's funny. I find myself changing exotics frequently too. I'm the type of person that I heavily value neutral game, like and specifically like movement neutral game stuff, just because it's one of my favorite parts of the game, and it's so I tend to gravitates toward things like Dragon Shadow, Stompy, stuff like that. But
funny you would say that. A lot of top players do. Now, first impressions of the build, if you may.
Okay, so yeah, 100 intellect. Yeah, this is like I would say the only thing that is surprising to me here is very low discipline, which usually I see like a lot higher discipline because of how strong like
Peep the class mod, the cloak.
Oh, double bomber, yeah. Yeah, so it's funny actually because I do something sort of similar with this on mine usually, where I run 100 mobility, 100 recovery, and then like as much discipline as I can get, but then also double bomber. And it's like I'm getting those dust fields so fast. It's like I literally am guaranteed to have a dust field every single round. Top Tree Dawn, again, back to the kind of meta discussion, is a really good dust field counter because it's one of the only classes that can like consistently get out of.
And so yeah, when building these teams, you have to like think about that. Well, I can't go Middle Tree Archstrider if there's a Chaos Reach, and I also can't fully depend on my Dustfield Grenade if there's a Top Tree Dawn. It's just a lot of interaction and changing before the match even starts, just based on what other people pick when you start understanding these metas. And so this is one of the rare times that I have basically copy and pasted everyone else's build because it is indeed the strongest. And what makes Stompy Hunter or maybe Bakris Hunter the strongest with Revenant right now is what you're about to see on screen, which is me jumping out of cover, putting a shot, shatter diving back in. Jump out of cover, put a shot, shatter dive back in. It's obnoxious, it's unbalanced, but it's in the game, and if you're playing to win, you got to use it. That's one of those cases where this is so strong that it makes every other build for Hunter to me just not exist.
I think the introduction of shatter dive is actually crazy for so many reasons, and it actually is not even the Drewski dunk. Like that was it was incredibly powerful on its own, but the fact that so hunters have some of the best aerial movement in terms of like the agility.
Yeah, with stompies, right?
And the one downside though is that, as you just demonstrated,
you're stuck in the air.
You're stuck on a not even just in the air, but in a fairly predictable trajectory once you've done your second jump, right? Like you can move a little bit side to side, but basically you're coming straight down. And there's actually like Kovac scenarios I practice that are like literally exactly that, like arc type.
And your shatter dive can go any direction after the jump. So you have 3 ways of changing your movement with this, which can mess up even the best of players. You can jump out, control jump in, and shatter dive back out.
Yep. And also for now at least, getting damage resistance while you're doing that. So it's
The damage resistance is part of why I don't use a 140 hand cannon, for example. When Hawkmoon was hot and new, I started using Hawkmoon, but then I saw hunters repeat shatter diving. Not only am I potentially missing a shot because of the erratic movement, but also I can't even 3-tap them. That's the frustration and why I've been copy pasting the established Stompy meta build on my hunter. There is no better option than this, in my opinion. And this sort of plays to the perspective of some people wear this badge of honor for being anti-meta and get mad at, let's say, Fellwinter's Lie being used against them. Whereas a lot of my subscribers look at me as this like anti-meta player. And the thing is, I'm not being deliberately anti-meta because it's cool. I'm being anti-meta because I understand the meta, and I think what I'm using is the best pick. I think Starfire Protocol on my Warlock is the best pick. And I'm gonna explain my Titan to you now, which I may have copy pasted the Hunter build from other people, but everyone copy pasted my Titan build. This is the final boss of Titans. Yeah, you know exactly what I'm coming in with.
I feel like you kind of popularized this for the most part, and the amount of Titans using what I believe you're about to show me is gone up through the roof. Like, it's crazy how often I even made a tweet about it the other day because I have seen so many Titans using exactly what I believe you're about to show me.
This is the final boss of Titan builds. It took me a whole season to put it together before it was even popular. And this is the hipster side coming out. But again, I'm not wearing this with the badge of honor. I'm saying at the time, I believe this was the strongest thing when everyone else was on Dune Marchers. And now you see Dune Marcher Titans adapting to my build. So is it anti-meta anymore, or is it meta?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Titans is one of those where if I see Titans on the enemy team, two things come to mind. I'm either being obnoxious with Bastion, or I'm using a blinding grenade launcher. And those are my counter picks for that.
Mm-hmm.
My thought is, well, Bastion breaks the barricade and then has 2 more shots to kill the person behind it. So as long as they can miss their first shot, I've successfully got a pick.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong counter to it for sure.
The blinding launcher comes in to where I can put a blinding nade somewhere from safety, bounce it over their barricade, and blind them. So where now they lose their radar, and even if they can shoot through their barricade, they can't see.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of predicting the future with the meta, this is something we were talking about in the kind of prep for this chat, which was this new Scott rifle, Dead Man's Tale. I think this could become one of the strongest weapons in the entire history of Destiny 1 and 2 if it doesn't get nerfed.
This is my knee-jerk first impression. It aligns with yours. I think it is the strongest weapon ever created. When we're talking relative power strength. Like, obviously, Vex Mytho class is the strongest primary ever. But for the current sandbox that we're in, I think this exceeds it.
And specifically, we're talking about with the Catalyst, I think, which is, for people who maybe don't have it yet, what it does is that if you're ADS, you shoot at 120 RPM, and you're kind of limited by how fast you can strafe side to side because you're ADS, so you move a little bit slower. With the Catalyst, you're, number one, able to shoot at around 150 RPM, but then also you can strafe side to side at maximum speed. So if you have 100 mobility for maximum strafe speed, you can be still shooting at 150 RPM, and it has insane accuracy where I can be, try to find an angle, like pretty easily still get full damage headshots on you. And if you're able to land 3 headshots and you can start 2-tapping the next person.
There's going to be a lot more ands than that. Like, the viewers at home probably think you're just like, all right, so what's the cons?
To me, like, the feeling of using it over the last few days is that I feel like it's sort of what the last word is supposed to sort of be for mouse and keyboard feel. Because I know, like, you're kind of a fan of the last word on mouse and keyboard, and I haven't really felt like very reliable with it, but with this, the way that this hip fire works, it feels so good to me. Like, it feels like when I'm aiming at something, it's extremely generous with how the hip fire works.
I'm glad you put it as generous, because a lot of people misquote me on the last word. It's not that I think the last word is unusable on mouse and keyboard or OP on controller. It just humbles your aim on mouse and keyboard because every other weapon is generous and the last word is normal. But yeah, it humbles your aim. Whenever I practice on last word for the entire week and have it glued to my hip quite literally, it proves results. I'm very confident taking duels. I know that I will get the 3-tap in situations.
Yeah, and I always like think of it as, okay, so Destiny, love or hate it, is a game that happens to have a lot of aim assist. I personally would like to see that drastically reduced because I find games that require more precision in your aiming to be more rewarding, games like Apex and whatnot. That's just, that is the way it is. Destiny has a lot of aim assist. So you can choose to either ignore that and make the game harder on yourself, or you can use weapons that are very generous. And I think we saw that a lot with like the 150 hand cannons, like Spear Rations and all that back in the day, right? And there's just, it's no surprise that the community tends to gravitate towards weapons that are the most forgiving and generous.
I still like that they put some master weapons as an option. The last word being one of those for mouse and keyboard. Unless you're on point, I don't think it's an option for a lot of people. But this scout, unlike that, is you can miss by a good margin and it'll still give you the headshot, which means that it's going to be used a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think one of the biggest things too is, here, I'll just demo it real quick. So this is my strafing speed side to side when I'm ADS'd. This is my strafing speed side to side when I'm
significantly faster.
No matter how good of an aimer you are, it is much harder to hit someone who's moving like nearly twice the speed. It's just harder. So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a big one here. I consider you good at aiming. Did you notice winning more duels when hand cannon targeting went away on the helmet?
It was harder for me to land shots than normal, but a lot of more people seemed to be also missing. So yeah, I felt like my chances of winning were sometimes higher, but I also felt like I personally was missing more because of the less forgiveness.
I felt a significant improvement in my like day-to-day gunfight winning because the targeting went away. So the effect of not having this targeting on the helmet means that while people are flying through the air, sweep aiming towards a health bar and just pulling the trigger then aiming, as I say, it rewards them with the headshot. Whereas without the targeting, they have to take that extra frame or two to make sure that it is on their face. So if you're a really disciplined player with your aim, when the targeting's off, you should be winning more duels. But at the same time, if you know Destiny's nuanced systems and abuse them, just make sure to be ready to adjust whenever the aim assist gets knocked down on any particular weapon. The scout might be one of those in the future.
So speaking of, this is a good segue to a question from the community that people had asked. So I'm curious, what is your actual definition of skill when it comes to Destiny?
It's changed over the years. A lot of people, for example, might put a lot of weight into the KD stat. I don't think a high KD means you're skilled. I think it means you farmed the stat. I think the more important stat is the win percentage, and especially the win percentage in a mode where other people want to win. At one point, the competitive playlist was that. I think skill in Destiny is half the skill of adapting and the other to playing a mix of abilities in gunplay. And the keyword there being a mix. There have been meta balancing patches from the devs where it's sometimes all guns and sometimes all abilities. Right now, we are in an ability-centric meta. I will say for the highest echelon of skilled players that the meta has always and always will been hand cannon sniper. But from the casual Valence perspective, how do you make a sniper rifle which is hard to use, but effortless to use for a master level player? Balanced. Because if you make it too forgiving, well, then you're leading every gunfight with a snipe. But if you make it too hard, a casual would have never used it in the first place.
I think that's actually one of the great challenges in game design is balancing things for different skill levels. And you see this in other games like, games I follow like Counter-Strike closely in different competitive games like that. And there's certain weapons where, this is certainly true in Destiny too, where at the highest levels, something is completely busted because people's their aiming ability or movement ability or whatever combination of skills are so high that it makes something very, very strong. But there's a certain threshold of skill you need to hit for that to be true. And if you're not at that skill level, then it's not that good. And some other weapons which maybe are easier seem to be busted. And it's interesting how that sort of changes at each different level of skill.
So if I'm building like handpick a perfect Destiny player, a high skill Destiny player, They need to have a understanding of the deck building aspects of the game, right? So all those little examples I gave you of resilience and, oh, look, this dude popped a barricade. What's your answer? Type thing. Those are the interactions of the sandbox, the deck building aspects. Then there's the raw movement mastery, which you're going to see from Dawn Blades, even subtle things like jumping on a box in between like your RPM so that as you land on the box, you get as much accuracy as possible. So all those little things that lead to more efficient movement culminate in a better player. You're going to be landing more accurate shots. You're going to be getting shots out faster. And so that adds on to the next aspect of skill, which is going to be your value as a team player, because this is a team game. Show me the 1v1 ladder that is competitive here. Doesn't exist. And even if it did, it would be really hard to make a rule set where it's not just coin tosses. But yeah, team play. It's making yourself, your time to live under high pressure situations just a second longer. That's an eternity in fast paced games. That's something a high skill player does, is they make themselves really difficult to kill and leave with chip damage at all times. If they're going down, someone's getting a sniper shot to the body as they go down. Or someone's getting hit with a grenade, or they're zoning something out right as they drop, and they're conveying information while they do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would throw communication into that same bucket too, where it's like a good, you might not be the most technically skilled player, but you can be a really good teammate by giving excellent information and call outs so that the more talented players on your team have basically additional information to work off of. I think that's a huge thing that not a lot of people value as much as they should.
Whenever I'm coaching a player to get better at this, just to make the game play better, I bring up what I call mental tax. It's all the things that you have to keep track of in a game, and it's taxing to do so. And eventually you're going to hit this level of autopilot with the aim and movement and deck building aspects and interactions of this game to where it's not really taxing to do any of those. It just happens. And so then you focus all that unused mental energy on communication. And if you're more of a support role in a team, especially, your communication matters that much more because you want to remove that mental tax off your Slayer. You want them to only focus on that aim.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the things that, so again, I come from like playing Counter-Strike at fairly competitive levels when I was younger, and I used to hate trying to be the in-game leader because I would notice that my slaying performance would drop off so drastically because all of my energy was like focusing on telling my teammates what to do and like trying to like think of like where they are on the map and like how how they should interact and stuff, and like all of a sudden it's like my brain didn't have enough RAM to remember still how to like aim and win my own duels. But it's like as soon as someone else takes that burden off of you, it's like I could just purely focus on just kind of getting in the zone and aiming well and winning.
For real, duels. Not everybody is made for every role. And I built my skills, and I don't think any player will fully master every skill set, every possibility. I'm just talking hypotheticals here and building a perfect Destiny player. For me, I have to accept what's realistic, and for me, in-game leader is the realistic one. Taking that stress off someone else makes me win more. And I also take full responsibility if my call is bad. I know I'm not the best player in this game, but I know that I can have a very high win rate if I build the proper team around me. And you can say I'm carried or whatever, but the only people that matters to me, whether they feel they're carrying or not, is the two people I'm bringing with me. Everyone else's opinion does not matter to me in that regard. So as long as my teammates know that I cannot be replaced and they cannot be replaced from my POV, we're probably going to be the best team ever. In Destiny, though, with the landscape of changing metas all the time, it's really hard to stay motivated and competitively motivated, which there's a big difference between your pickup Trials team in the weekend and an organized Counter-Strike team with how much they practice and study. Destiny players are not even scratching the surface of being competitive in these games. So I just want to make sure that distinction is put there.
100%. And I mean, this is something I kind of have talked about in a few other videos too, where it's like, one of the things about Destiny is that you're generally speaking always playing different people, right? Like in the matchmaking, like it's, sometimes you might match the same team back to back in Trials, but generally speaking, you're playing people you've never come across before. Whereas like when you're talking about like, let's go back to competitive Counter-Strike and look at the pro level where like Team Astralis plays Team Liquid, for like the 100th time in the last few years, there's an entire mental game that goes around like they've seen the tendencies of each other a million times and they know every little detail. And so it's like You know, a lot of it is just like psychological counterplay of like thinking that someone's going to do this because you've seen them do this a million times. And that just doesn't really exist in Destiny, except for like tournaments and scrim play and stuff where people have played each other enough times to start developing that type of relationship.
Yeah, that does happen between my friends. Literally, the first Trials card we ever played in Destiny 2, the Trials of Osiris card, we scrimmed only one team to practice. Just one team. Guess what team knocked us out of Flawless?
that team.
Every other team wasn't even on our radar because we were like, oh, yeah, we're practiced.
And that's the thing. That's something about Destiny is that you just, you know, because of the way that the matchmaking works, you're just not going to tend to play the same team over and over again. It might happen from time to time, but it's not like the average thing.
Yeah, on a micro level, that does happen in Destiny with the way metas develop. One of those being copycats of the Arcstrider month for me. They're like, hey, that looks kind of fun. Let me try it. And so I had this unique experience of being 2 weeks ahead of that meta development, feeling like I stepped out of the time machine and being like, that's not going to work here. I figured out the flow with that strategy. Most famous example of this is this dude religiously hunted me down in a like control match. He had the Middle Tree Arcstrider build, same as mine. So I mind gamed him by going into my inventory while I died, switching to a Devil's Ruin, and then finding him somewhere in the match. I pop my super literally on top of him. I stall for a second. He pops his, instinctively hits me twice while I block. And then he creates some space really quick to start his blocking, knowing that since he has Raiju's harness on and I pop first, his super lasts longer. So mine's going to go out. He knows that if he stands there blocking, his teammates are getting angles and he's making my super be wasted. But he didn't think of one thing. What if I just cancel my super and charge Devil's Ruin? It goes through the blocking. And it worked. It was such a satisfying, like, I understand this meta moment.
That's like a perfect example of like really understanding like the deck building aspect of the game. So, okay, I have an interesting question here. This is one that I think you might have an interesting take on. So should you practice only one loadout or try to get good at as many loadouts as possible? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
It depends on your amount of time you can invest. If you're pressed for time in Destiny, choose one all-encompassing consistent loadout and stick to that. If you have all the time in the world, pick the greatest hits of the Destiny sandbox, and then maybe two or three things that stick out to you that you personally like. And I think you'll have a pretty well-rounded kit.
People ask me how to get better at sniping, like literally every day, and that's one of the things I tell people is that it's a lot easier, I feel like, to get better at sniping when you just pick one sniper to try to get really good at that has, or at least one zoom distance, so that you're not like relearning how to.
Yeah, you don't have to go that extra like I do, where you match the handling stat, the snapshot, the sniper frame, and then all the armor perks together, so it is 1-to-1. Remember how we talked about what makes a skilled Destiny player, and then I talked about the dream skilled Destiny player, the perfect player? Mm-hmm. One of those things I mentioned was your autopilot. Part of having the snipe stay the same is leveling up your autopilot to where you can hit some nasty shots without even thinking about it. You don't have to be deliberate with your aim. It's just an extension of your hand. It's gonna hit what you think about aiming at without thinking. You can hear the little floof of a warlock jump or a hunter jump starting, and you're going to instinctively put the crosshair where you know it needs to be. With any other zoom level, perk, etc., you have to second guess yourself in that situation. Wait that extra second to make sure it lands. If you stick to the same zoom, you don't have to think anymore. That's the beauty of it. We talked about in-game leader also maybe taking the brunt off other players. The most incredible loadout for me to do that job well is Snipe Lion for two reasons. Number one, it's a gun that I'm practiced with, the snipe. I don't have to think about aiming it. And number two, my teammates can physically see the projectile of Fighting Lion, so it acts almost as a laser designator, which means I don't have to talk as much sometimes. If they see that flying in a certain place, they're already primed to wait for the damage number of whatever the lion hits. And so they're already getting the angle ready to clean it up.
Well, it gives so much information, right? Where it's like you say like, oh, hit for 100 damage, and like, so that tells you so much. It tells you, first of all, you know roughly where someone is, but you also like how close they were to them.
They are to death.
Yeah, I mean, like how close their health is to dying, so they know like how much damage you need to still put in. Maybe that's one hand cannon shot, two hand cannon shots, one shot.
I'll say absolute or DI, and they know that like that's the time to dive because they've been hit for at least 160 damage.
Yeah, well, also like if you see the projectile going, you know, it's like if you shoot into a hallway and I see you shoot it and I hear you say 100, if I know the gun reasonably well, I know probably where that player is, like pretty close, right? Versus like, you know, if someone's like in B on this map, like.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. Exactly.
You could be anywhere, but if I see the projectile go in and I know like how you shot it and you say 100 damage, I want to have a pretty good idea of like without you
of what you need to do to follow it up.
Exactly, like where I can expect that player to be. Like that's a lot of subconscious information that you don't even have to actually articulate that gets transferred to me just by you making that one play.
And so now all these things we talked about culminate, and my autopilot's as strong as it can be from sniping on the same zoom. I'm taking mental tax away from my teammates by using a gun that is literally a laser designator. And it also counter meta picks majority of the sandbox. Do you know how annoying it is to get hit by a fighting lion around a corner? So to answer that original question of should you stick to one loadout or explore? Explore till you understand the meta and then stick to one thing that gets you a lot of bang for your buck.
I think that's super good advice. I would totally agree with that. So another question here about basically 6v6 gameplay, and he was basically asking like how do you put yourself in a situation where you can get kills but not overextend so much that you end up like dying a lot. Basically, like it's more of like a positioning question.
In 6v6, I'm gonna tell you it's not your fault, but don't get an ego because of this. Your teammates have a lot to do with spawns and spawn waiting on a map. If your teammates are the kind that spawn and walk backwards, you're going to have a terrible match because you're essentially waiting the spawn to where you're only spawning in this small corner of the map, most likely. And so you're going to keep getting, you're going to become 7th column fodder for someone else. And it also depends on the actual strength of your teammates as a player, which is one of the more frustrating parts of maybe freelance modes. If you play Iron Banner this week and got stuck at the power ammo kill part, that's probably because you're a slayer. And what you're doing for your team by slaying is you are giving them an opportunity to stand on a zone and capture a zone. Why? Because you're putting the enemies in the spawn screen. It's the same thing with the power ammo. The only reason you're able to grab the power ammo without someone yeeting a dust field in that general direction is because you're pushing them into a corner of their spawn. So overextending is okay as long as it serves that purpose, but you also have to pack enough of a punch that you can overextend. You don't have to win a gunfight. You just have to stall for that long. So the answer to this question is due to the variance of matchmaking and the variety of skill levels you're going to have for teammates and the maps. Like Dead Cliffs is a map that's extremely spawn weighted. Overextending can be both a good and a bad thing, and it's up to you to play more and be critical about your own gameplay review when you record it to decide whether or not you made the right call. I've played this game for like 10,000 hours plus. I'm pretty confident when I overextend that I'm making the right decision for like some point of the game so they can get a power ammo or a flag.
I think that's a good way to approach it. I like it. All right, I have one important final question for you, which is the most requested one. It's about how do you maintain your beard? Do you use beard oil? Do you have any sort of a process, or you just kind of let it go all natural?
It grows a millimeter every time I get frozen, but the real answer is yeah, I use a beard balm. I use a beard like conditioner in the shower. And then I guess just normal stay hydrated kind of thing so your skin is healthy.
Nice. That's good advice. Moisturizer, pro tip, by the way, for anyone trying to grow a beard.
I'm going to say another pro tip. Dude, sleeves for mouse and keyboard are a game changer in Florida. I used to sweat all over the place.
That's funny. I was talking to Seradius the other day, and he also is a sleeve gamer. I have like kind of medium to dry skin, so I don't tend to like have sweaty forearms, and so I don't use one, but that's interesting that you find it really helpful.
I pull like 18-hour streams casually, so I will heat up over time just to the machines around me heating up and then the weather changing.
Yeah, there's so many interesting little gaming peripherals coming out. Like I just got I'm testing a new mouse today, the Logitech G Pro wireless, the Superlight one that just came out, and yep. I was looking at all these accessories. People are like talking about, you know, aftermarket skates have been around for a long time, but now all of a sudden like grip grip tape is becoming really popular on those mice.
Like on skateboards?
Yeah, where like you basically apply, it's like a sticky on one side and sort of like a grippy texture on the other, and you put it on like the buttons and on like the sides and stuff. So it's just interesting how the gaming peripherals
I have been
expand.
using a Razer Viper Ultimate mouse. It's a lightweight, and I used to be heavy. It's been about a year now, and I'm still mixed feelings on lightweight mice. But I'm at the same skill level I was with the heavy mouse, so I think I just have to keep going here. But I've enjoyed the mouse regardless. Wireless, I can't go back to wired.
Oh, I know, me too. I'm on wireless as well, and I actually used to use the G502 from Logitech. That was like when I first got back into PC gaming, like I don't know, 5 to 7 years ago, something like that. That was like the first mouse I went to. I played a bunch of Counter-Strike and stuff, and that thing is pretty heavy. And I've like over time gone to lighter and lighter and lighter mice, but it's just funny because I felt like my aim actually back then was pretty solid. Like, you know, it's not like you can still aim well with those, but for me it's more
maybe
like,
this is a part 2 episode for the future, but types of aimers in these games
and
the types of aims game necessitate.
Yeah.
Because there were certain situations where like a heavy mouse is the way for me, and then other situations like when someone's stompy shotgun flies through the door, then I'm like, I'm glad I'm on lightweight. Since Destiny was one of my first mouse and keyboard games, I was able to build my key scheme and peripherals around Destiny 2 instead of just adapting what I was already used to from other games. And that's been a really big boon to just how much I can abuse the sandbox at times.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But this Dead Man's Tail scout rifle is probably the final boss of those decision-making things, because having extremely precise hipfire from a slow DPI, but also having hipfire just be more free for 180 turns is the right mix for me.
I feel like this gun is the ultimate, like, I told you so for when people ask me how to improve your aim, and I tell them Kovacs is really helpful, and people say, oh, but you only hipfire in that, and Destiny is an ADS game. Like, well, all of a sudden your hipfire aim's pretty important now, huh?
Yeah, I play a lot of first-person Osu, and my sensitivity there is tuned to only hipfire. So, yeah, I guess all that anime wasn't for nothing, right? No.
That's awesome. Well, Cammy, thank you so much for doing this episode. I'm sure people are gonna really enjoy this. Maybe we can do a part 2 with some of the things we touched on as well.
Absolutely. I want to clarify on a closing note. I don't think I'm the best at the game, but I've played this game far too long not to have some sort of beneficial advice. So hope you guys don't ever take anything I say out of context here. I'm just trying to improve, same as everyone else.
And same goes for me. I know that I'm not the best player in Destiny, and I just try to, like, you know, share the things that I've found helpful with people who watch my videos. So
yeah, being able to build upon what other people say, whether you agree or disagree, is how you get better. So listen to what was said today and challenge it.
Totally. I'll link all your socials in the description and whatnot. Do you have anything you want to plug, though? Any particular projects or whatnot going on?
That state of the game today is quite literally a game changer for me. I know my content has been a little bit sparse in Destiny again, but now that sunsetting might be off the table, I'm probably exploring a lot of just meme builds because I can, and it's not going to devalue the time spent to acquire anything. So that's really my only announcement, is that, like, while my content is sparse now, it's about to ramp up.
Cool. I think everyone will be excited for that.
Well, thank you for letting me be here.
Absolutely.
I've been listening to your other episodes while I do chores, so it passes the time very well. Shout out to anyone else doing the dishes right now.
It's been a cool project. I'm happy to have you on. Seriously, a lot of people have asked for you to be on this series, so it's been fun.